Hi, Art. My cousin and her husband bought a house in a suburb of Phoenix about 6 years ago. They and their 2 kids, plus another cousin of mine, moved in right away. My cousin, who we will call Linda, found herself at home all night with only the kids. Linda's husband worked the graveyard shift, and her brother took a job in Laughlin. That'd be Laughlin, Nevada. The night in question was just like any other, until her 4-year-old son came into the room and woke her up. She was not facing him when he woke her up, and she did not immediately turn around. She asked him what he wanted, and he told her he couldn't sleep because somebody was in his room. She told him, of course there is. You share your room with your brother. He told her it's not his brother. It's some guy he doesn't know. At this point, she turned around to look at him, and when she did, she saw a man standing behind her son. She described him as wearing a plaid cowboy shirt, blue jeans, and a cowboy hat. She said she could see right through him to the doorway behind. She said that he was white, kind of glowing. She said a lot like you see in the movies. She immediately jumped out of bed and he was gone. She grabbed both of her sons and went to her mother's house. Her brother claimed to have seen him about 2 weeks later. Much more than I can tell here. Great show. We've got our candles burning. Gary and Sandy at KFYI in Phoenix. It was a Sunday night. I worked the graveyard shift and got done getting ready for work a little early. Since I had about a half hour to kill, I sat down, put on the headphones to listen to the stereo. As I relaxed, I got that eerie feeling that someone was watching me. Couldn't resist the feeling. So I turned around and saw someone run down the hall. I knew my roommate was out for the night, but thought, well, maybe he'd come home and was playing a trick on me. Went down the hall, turned on all the lights, called out to him, no response. Okay, my mind is playing tricks on me. So I sat down and put the headphones back on. I started getting that strange feeling again that someone was watching me. This time I turned around quickly and again saw someone run back down the hall. At this point I was getting scared. I ran out of the apartment, went to work. Later called my roommate, told him what happened. He told me I was cracked. The next day seemed fairly normal. I went to bed around noon. About 7 that night I was awakened by the sound of a girl crying. It was dark in my room, but I could see the living room lights from under the door. I thought to myself, my roommate and his girlfriend had gotten into a fight. I laid there for a while, and the crying continued. The more I listened, I could tell that the crying wasn't coming from the living room. So I sat up in bed. And there was a girl sitting on the chair in my bedroom. She was about 16 years old, wearing a blue dress from the late 1800s, long blonde hair, and crying. When I asked her who she was and what was wrong, she looked at me with a frightened look, stood up, and disappeared right into the wall. I came running out of the bedroom. My roommate was sitting quietly watching TV. I told him what had just happened. He, of course, didn't see or hear any of it, didn't believe me. Never saw the girl again. To this day, I have no explanation as to what happened. That's from Pat in Scottsdale, Arizona, listening to KFYI. Thanks, Pat. That's a hair curler. And then this. Art, I was an Eastern Orthodox priest for many years, and in that time I've witnessed many interesting, if not frightening, things. This is one that I'd like to tell you about. In 1974, a close friend of mine lost her father. He'd been very popular during the 40s as a singer and guitar player on the radio. He and his wife had been divorced for many years at the time of his death. He lived alone and died of a heart attack while sleeping in his bed. It was 3 days before his body was discovered. About a week after the funeral, his ex-wife moved back into the house that he'd lived and died in. 2 months after his death, I received a phone call from my friend asking if I could come over to her mother's house. Apparently her mother was beginning to act a little strange, and she was concerned. When I got there, the 3 of us sat down, and my friend's mother related this story to me. She said she was convinced she was going crazy. She said about 2 weeks earlier, she woke up in the middle of the night to the singing of her dead ex-husband. She walked into the front room, and he was sitting in the rocking chair smiling at her. She went back into the bedroom and spent the rest of the night with no sleep. She then told me after that she'd be sitting in the front room, and for no reason it would feel like someone was grabbing or pinching her legs, after which welts would appear on her legs. Also, she'd continue to hear her dead husband singing every night. I told her I didn't think she was going crazy, having had some working knowledge of the rite of exorcism. I asked her if she'd feel better if I went through the house and blessed it. She said it certainly would make her feel better. I took out a small bottle of holy water and proceeded to go through the house room by room, beginning with the basement. Everything went fine. I saved the bedroom for last. Upon entering the bedroom, there was a noticeable temperature difference. It was very cold, and you could see your breath. The mother stood in the doorway, and as I threw the holy water around the room, the mother was thrown backwards out of the doorway into the hallway. When I asked her what was wrong, she said something had hit her in the legs, like something was trying to push her out of the way. I was a little skeptical until she pulled her pants legs up, and there they were, large red welts on both legs just above the knee. I'm not trying to make any claims as to what was going on in that house, but I can say that after I blessed the house, there was no further problem with visions or physical manifestations. On the wildcard line, you are on the air. Good evening.
Good evening, Art. It's Andrea in Vista, California.
Welcome to the program.
Okay, what happened was I was sleeping in this mobile home in a twin bed, and about 3 o'clock in the morning, I suddenly awakened, but my eyes were still closed, and I sensed kind of an energy down at my feet.
Down at your feet?
Yeah, down at my feet. It was really bizarre. I didn't move. My eyes were still closed. It was a kind of a positive feeling. I wasn't afraid of it, and I felt this energy kind of moving, kind of up on the side of the bed.
Yes.
Up towards my head. Well, when it got right up to just about to where my arms were, I decided, well, I best. The first thing. Wait. I thought for a minute. It was this whatever it was warm and good. And the first thing I said was, "Mom, is that you?" And then I didn't get a response. So then I opened my eyes, and there's this figure standing there, just looking at me. It was pink and blue.
Pink and blue.
Pinkish, just a pinkish illumination and blue.
All right, so it was not a solid form.
Not quite. Well, it was shaped like a human and as tall as a human, but it wasn't quite solid. And I said the darndest thing. I said, "Can I help you?"
People say the darndest things. Well,
I wasn't afraid of it. I was looking at it wondering, what is this?
Can I help you? Okay.
Can I help you? And then it vanished.
And it
slowly dissipated.
Maybe it was shocked. I mean, maybe what you said at that moment just absolutely astounded it, even in spirit form, and it couldn't handle it.
But
maybe it had been wandering the aisles of large discount stores now for months with nobody ever asking a question like that.
But oh my God, I remember calling my friend, and he just didn't believe me, and oh.
Well, I believe you.
Good.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care. Well. May I help you? Wildcard line, you're on the air. Hi.
Hi, Art. How you doing?
Just fine. Where are you?
I'm in Lexington.
Lexington, Kentucky. Excellent.
Got two stories for you.
All right.
One was when I graduated from tech school when I was in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
Me and a WAF boarded a plane in Chicago, and so she was telling me about the aircraft, and as we boarded, there was two pilots sitting in the back. And I said, we can talk to them, later on when we get airborne, because there was a technicality that she didn't quite understand on the aircraft.
Yes.
Well, the plane took off and everything, and the seatbelt deal came off, and I said, let's step back there and talk to them, and we looked around, and they were gone. So I said to the airline stewardess, I said, ma'am, where did the pilot go? She said, what pilot? I said, the two pilots in the back. And the girl sitting with me said, yeah, we seen two of them. She said, wait right here, I'll be right back. And she ran and got two stewardesses to come back. She said, tell them exactly what you told me. And so I told her and told the other two, and the one started crying and got all upset and had to take her in the back. Do you recall the aircraft that crashed in the Everglades?
Very well, sir.
That's what part of that was.
Oh, God. I've heard a lot of stories like this, and I think there are many. I have a very good friend that works for a major company, which I can't name, and when he retires from this company, I'm going to have him on the air, and we're going to tell some of these stories. But you are exactly right. That particular crash...
I think it was Flight 401, wasn't it?
401 or 409.
They were chalky white looking, the individuals, but they looked solid.
Listen to me. I'm telling you, I've heard privately told, not for attribution, stories just like the one you're telling me right now, and it's going on to this day. Aircraft are haunted.
Oh, okay.
And it's because of that particular crash and a few others, and...
Well, they cannibalize the parts, don't they, and put them in the other aircraft?
You see, yeah, that's right. You see spirits that lose their lives unexpectedly, as in an air crash, I think are the ones that tend to be troubled, possibly remain on this earth, possibly haunt at the location of their death, in this case, an aircraft. On the toll-free line, you're on the air. Hello.
Art Bell?
Yes.
This is the Agile Independent from Austin, Texas, on the mighty WOAI.
Austin, Texas. Yes, sir.
When I was a kid, about 7 years old, I stayed with my Aunt Marie in the country.
Yes.
It was a pretty nice thing, except for when we had to go to church, and this is a ghost story. Well, a kind of one.
Okay.
They were charismatic, and they would run around and act real silly in church, and so they'd make all us kids stay in the back of the church where we couldn't see them be silly, and we'd get really bored. So one day we decided to do something as a group, us kids, to offend them. So we found this pin and this little salamander lizard, and we nailed it to the wall, and we told them that if God didn't accept this sacrifice, we were giving it to Satan. And naturally they got really upset, but they didn't do anything terribly bad. The next night when I was asleep, for some reason I bolted straight awake. And I kept my room really clean. Well, actually I didn't, my Aunt Marie did. And when I looked into my closet, there was a thing sitting there. This thing, I mean, if it weren't for the way this thing looked, I would have thought it was a nightmare.
What was it?
It was, if you can imagine something that's four-dimensional, it's a pitch-black room, and this thing is so dark I can clearly see it. I mean, it was kind of like black light, and along the edges of it was kind of, you could see its edges because it's like the very air around it was repelled by it, like it found it obscene, and it's like the very matter around it just was repelling from it.
Oof, that'd do it for me.
Well, the only thing about it that actually looked physical was its teeth. It was a triangle with a slit up the center that ended in a little round thing, and when I looked into its eyes, which at first looked like kind of pools of light blood swimming around, it got two blue dots that looked just like my eyes that were in the center of it, and the longer I looked at it, the faster my heart began to beat. I got so scared I tried to yell out and scream for help, and I couldn't. My voice just stopped. I couldn't.
I understand that kind of fright. So frightening you cannot scream, not out loud.
Exactly. So the last thing I did was cried out to God for help in my head. It was all I could do. And the next thing I knew, it was morning, and I was laying down in bed, and I don't remember any time passing between those events.
Could it have been just a nightmare?
That would have been my attitude, except for one thing.
Yes?
Nothing on earth could look like this thing. Oh, and in the morning I looked into where the only other antidote to the story was I did open the closet because it was closed again when I woke up.
Yes.
And my toys were piled end on end.
Oh.
And my toys were kept very, very straight and neat. That was the other thing. They were always lined up very neatly on little shelves in the back, and they were totally jumbled as if someone had deliberately turned them over and upside down, but none of them were broken.
That'd be it for me, partner.
Yeah, I mean, but no. Try to imagine something that's four-dimensional and that the very environment around it, it just finds it obscene and repels from it.
I understand.
Imagine your eyes being sucked into this thing and seeing your own eyes looking back at you.
No, thank you. I appreciate the story.
You're welcome.
Thank you, from Austin, Texas. Well, this will sound silly to you, I suppose, but my wife knows. She may not know why until I tell you now. I know she's listening in the next room. I always close closet doors. I don't like closets. Closets are dark places where if anything was going to come, I would think it would come. And I always close closets before I go to sleep. Now, what is it about closets? They're dark areas from which things come. Everybody knows that. It's just a habit. I don't like open closet doors, and so before I go to bed, I always go over and close them. And that's why. Probably shouldn't admit that, huh? But it is true. Toll-free line, you're on the air. Good morning.
Hi, Art. This is Kirk in Medford, Oregon.
Hello, Kirk. What do you have for us?
Well, I've had some strange things happen to me in the mid-'50s. We lived in a house in California on Garden Grove Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a kid of maybe about 10, 11. And I had trouble, like going in the bedroom. It seems that things happened. And I was uncomfortable, and I just was afraid to go in this bedroom we had in this house. I didn't like it. And one night, my grandparents came over. And we had dinner and such. And just as they were leaving, I just happened to walk by my bedroom. I was getting ready to go to bed, and I saw the curtain move. And just out of the corner of my eye, and I had a bad feeling. And I looked over, and I could hardly believe my eyes. And I didn't want to go in the bedroom, but it turned out it was time to go to bed, so we did. And when I went in there, no sooner had I been on the bed for more than 2 or 3 minutes, it seemed unreasonably dark, and I started to panic. And I noticed my window being open, a slight breeze coming in, and it was unreasonably cold. And with no warning, this unusual ghost-like being floated through the window. And I got the impression that it was female. I don't know why. It had white hair that almost looked like straw. And I tried so hard to scream, and it's an odd sensation. I know I was awake. I wasn't dreaming because, I was aware of...
Let me guess, the scream wouldn't come.
Well, it did slightly. It did slightly, but I just couldn't get it out, and this being floated toward me, and it grabbed my hand, and as I was starting to scream, and actually, I was making sounds, it tied something around my finger, and then I was completely immobile. It then kind of floated me up out of bed and by the window, and I actually floated out the window, and I got the sensation when I was floating that I was like on a magic carpet. And I remember being floated toward a light, and I remember being poked and prodded, and I got the weirdest sensation, like almost like a tickling sensation. I noticed a buzzing sound. And then I don't remember much after that. I remember being back in bed.
You know what I would say to you, sir?
What's that?
And I don't know if it'd be right or not, but I would say if you ever have the opportunity, get a hypnotist to regress you. What you may have experienced may not have been so much a ghost story as it is an abduction story.
And that's what kind of scares me because I'll tell you something. Several months after that, I was back in my bedroom, and talk about closets. I was laying in bed. My little brother used to hop in bed with me. I was used to that. He'd hop in bed. He got scared a few times.
Sure.
But one night, my little brother was not in the bedroom, and it turns out that I felt something next to me, touching me all over, and it felt like claws. and it was the weirdest, most awful thing, and it pushed me in the closet, inside the closet, and the door went shut. And that time I did manage to scream. My mother came in and turned the light on and found me in there, and I was shaking hysterical.
All right. I appreciate the call, sir. There it is, another closet story. I suggest to you all, and you need not do it. It's your business. But if you have an open closet now, close it. On the wild card line, you're on the air. Hello.
Good morning, Art.
Good morning, sir.
This is Mick from Phoenix.
Great.
I'm not real sure if this is a ghost story or not.
Well, tell it, and we'll let you know.
In the summer of '77, I woke up about 2:30 in the morning because my girlfriend was out of bed. So I walked into the living room to find out what was wrong, and she was sitting on the couch, naked, with her knees pulled up under her chin and her eyes about the size of saucers, and looking at me like I'd grown 3 or 4 extra heads. So I said, what's wrong? What's going on? She says, don't do that to me. Well, it took a little while, but she finally told me that what had happened was she heard me talking, and she thought I was in my sleep. She rolled over towards me, and she said, you're as stiff as this coffee table and as cold as an ice box. I said, what do you mean? She says, I don't know. I said, I got up and took a look, and you're laying there in bed, stiff. Your mouth's a little bit open, but your lips aren't moving, and you're carrying on a conversation with a little boy and a woman, and I can hear them talking back to you, and you're talking to a third person, another woman, but I can't hear her.
Oh, boy. I guess I'd have done the same thing. I'd be up and out.
Well, I guess so. Anyway, apparently I sat and carried on this conversation with a little boy and a woman, with my mouth not moving, being as stiff as a board and as cold as the freezer, for about 5 or 10 minutes, and she sat there and listened to a little bit of it, and then went out in the living room, and she could hear all of us talking. And it definitely spooked her, and it affected our relationship considerably. Most of the conversation concerned whether or not the woman that she could hear, where she had left her glasses, why she wasn't wearing them. And what it all hinged from was 6 months earlier, my wife, our son, and her mother were all killed in a car accident.
Oh, my gosh.
And no one could tell me exactly what happened. So I knew a private investigator, and I asked him, how can I find out what happens? And he laid out all the rules and where I went and what I had to go and who I had to see and what kind of papers I had to get.
Right.
And I went off and spent about a month doing that, and I found out exactly what happened to them and why. Except I could never figure out why I couldn't find her glasses anywhere in around the car or the accident scene. And so I don't know if it was my brain working with a problem who finally said, look, I'm going to give it an answer so you'll stop working on it, or if something supernatural actually happened.
Well, we'll let people decide for themselves, but I think I'd be opting for the latter.
The only reason I lean to it is because apparently the way I felt to her scared her more than the voices. She thought I was dead.
Thank you for the call, sir. That was a good story. I don't know. You tell me, folks. What happened to that man? West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Good morning. Where are you calling from, please?
Houston, Alaska.
Houston, Alaska.
Right.
All right. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. My name's Linda.
Hi, Linda.
And let me tell you first that I was born on Friday the 13th. And this story that I'm going to tell you happened to me 35 years ago when I was 13 in a place called Westfield, Massachusetts.
All right.
And at 13, I went to a public school there. And at 13, I had a crush on a boy that went to Catholic school. And I talked a couple of my friends in on a Monday night to go to see him after catechism got out.
Ah, yes.
And we had a curfew time. We had to be home. And we knew we were going to be late. So my friends, which was kitty corner to the church, was an old cemetery. And it had the wrought iron and the stone wall.
Oh,
and
yes.
As a child, I don't remember it ever being used, but it was an old cemetery. It was pretty shut down. And my friends talked me into going through the cemetery to take a shortcut home. So I was always a tomboy. I wasn't afraid of anything. So we took off through the cemetery running. And halfway through the cemetery...
Well, if you weren't afraid, then why were you running?
Well, we had a deadline to get home.
I've got you. All right.
Okay. We took off running through the cemetery, and halfway through the cemetery, I fell through the ground.
I beg your pardon?
I fell through the ground.
Through the ground. In other words,
into a hole which I assumed was a grave.
Grave, yeah, right.
And the dirt came in down around me.
Oh, boy.
And I was screaming. I had bugs that I assumed were termites. They had wings on them that I was covered with.
Oh, my God.
And at that time, as 13 years old, I was only about 5'1". I didn't know how I was going to get out of here. I remember screaming. And I felt something around my feet, a pressure, nothing, that was grabbing onto me, but some kind of pressure that lifted me up out of that dirt. And I was at a dead run, and I didn't stop until I got to the other side of the cemetery. And my friends were there, and I was covered with dirt, and I was covered with all these, which I assume probably were termite bugs that were all over me. And I never, to this day, have been in a cemetery. I'm 48 years old, and I've never been back in a cemetery to this day.
I cannot say I blame you. That, to me, would be the end of me, dear, because I would have a heart attack right on the spot.
That was very scary.
Fortunately, your heart was young enough to take it, I guess.
Right.
Great story. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care. From Alaska. Oh, man. Can you imagine running across a cemetery in the dark, falling into a grave with bugs crawling all over you? Again, East, you're on the air. Hi.
Yes, sir. This is Tony from Pueblo. Listen to you on KCSJ.
Pueblo, Colorado. Fine. Welcome to the program.
Story I have, it actually happened the summer of 1986, right before I went into the service.
Yes, sir.
And I'm originally from North Carolina, and
I can hear it in your voice.
Yeah, just a little bit of an accent.
Yeah.
The part of the country I'm from is known very well for its ghost stories and UFO sightings and things of that nature. On this particular night, me and a couple of my high school buddies decided we were going to go to this place that was reputed to be a haunted house. We went up there and went inside and was messing around, just goofing off, doing typical high school guy things.
You need not describe them, I recall.
So we went ahead, got pretty bored with that, didn't see anything interesting, so we decided to leave. Well, the house was located out in the country, I guess about 6 or 7 miles from the town I lived in. And we started back into town, and there's a long stretch of road called Piper's Gap Road in that area.
Okay.
We started down the road, and it just got real foggy. Just like it just sat down, and it's real humid back there, so I figured it was just one of them typical things, it got a little bit cooler, clouds came down.
And it just lays down, yeah.
And it just laid down on the road.
Sure.
Well, while we're going down through there, got to going and talking about people that pick up hitchhikers, and the next thing you know, they'll turn over, be talking to them, turn around, and they won't be there in the car.
Many stories like that.
So we're going down the road, and we come up to, I wouldn't say a fork in the road, I'd say an intersection where another road connected with the road we were on.
Yes.
As we approach it, we can just make out a person standing right on the side of the road, right at where the road connects.
A hitchhiker.
And he's got his thumb out.
Naturally.
Well, we're talking to each other, and I said, why don't we just stop and pick the guy up? And they're like, no, man, don't do it, because we've just been talking about picking up hitchhikers.
That's right.
So I said, no, we're going to go ahead and do it. And I was driving. So I pull the car over. The guy sitting beside me in the passenger seat rolls down the window, leans out and asks the guy if he needs a ride. Well, he just automatically turned back to me, and, his face was just ashen. It just went pale. And I leaned down and looked out the passenger window, and he had already asked him if he had wanted a ride. I looked at the guy. The guy was as white as a sheet, and he was still looking down the road in the direction that we had came from.
Huh.
And he didn't move, didn't make any sign that he even knew we were there. And the next thing I done was hit the gas and got out of there as fast as I could. And that was, 9 years ago, and it's still, to this day, I think about it, and it kind of gives me the shivers.
And what is it that you think you saw? Well, what was he?
You know, I don't know, because I'd never seen him before, and I come from a pretty small town, and you know, it was I guess it was a ghost. I mean, that's the only thing I can attribute it to, was it was a ghost. It was an apparition.
An apparition. I appreciate the call, sir.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. There you are. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Good morning.
Hello, Art.
Hello, where are you?
Austin, Texas.
Austin, welcome.
Yes, I'm calling about a story that if my family finds out I'm telling this, I'm going to be in big trouble, but it occurred in Louisiana about 100 years ago, and it's still occurring to this day.
Oh.
It's a 100-year-old ghost story that occurred originally in Coshada, Louisiana, and I had an aunt and uncle that lived 100 years ago, several generations removed, and they were recently married, and my aunt died shortly after the marriage, and the uncle was completely devastated. And when he was going to bury his wife, she was in her 20s, they hadn't been married for a year, he had the coffin ordered from New Orleans. He wanted a special coffin, he wanted a glass coffin, and he wanted her buried in Metairie Cemetery in New Orleans.
Metairie. Mm-hmm.
And he was told that it would take 6 months for the coffin to be ordered, and so he waited for the coffin to come up to Shreveport, up to his area, and he would keep the corpse upstairs in his house in the bedroom, and according to the servants at the house, he would kiss the corpse every night before he would go to bed.
Oh, boy.
The servant said that, he would order them to take the corpse out every day and air the corpse out in a wheelbarrow, and for 6 months. And he had a Ouija board, as you were talking about earlier.
Yes.
A Ouija board. The servant said he would talk to the corpse every night and have conversations. And apparently this was a jealous ghost. And the servants were horrified. They would not clean this room. They said that candles wouldn't light when they went up there. There was cold air. The candles would blow out. They could hear low-level whispers, and they said objects would fall from the room. And at night, they would, after a while, after a certain point, they would hear conversations between my uncle and some other voice.
Some other voice, the corpse, I presume. Oh, my God.
And as I say, no one would go into this room for many years. Eventually, the glass coffin did arrive. They did bury her in Metairie Cemetery in New Orleans. She's still there to this day in a crypt. And
did that end it?
No, because up until the 1970s, all of my relatives who would go to visit this house would not visit that room. They still said that cold area was still there. They could still feel the presence. I remember going there as a child with my aunt. My aunt had shaky legs; she wouldn't even walk up the stairs. They could hear the squeaky wheels of the wheelbarrow at night of the wheelbarrow that was supposed to air out the corpse. They could still hear that in the 1960s and 70s. And there was a portrait that they couldn't photograph.
Is this something that your family will not talk about?
It's not something that they're proud of. There is, but it is something that everyone knows about. And there is a certain member in the family who is a keeper of the key to the crypt, who does have a key to the.
Would you go in there?
Yeah, I guess I would. Just out of curiosity, because it's been something I've heard about all my life, and I'm curious about it.
All right. Well, I listen. I very much appreciate your call, but there's no way that I would. There's no way. Absolutely no way. West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Oh, hi, Art.
Hello there.
I'm Mary from Bakersfield.
Hi, Mary. How you doing?
Oh, pretty good, but that one did scare me.
Oh, boy.
I can just imagine that. If mine scared me, that one scared me more. Now, this happened when I was about 18, 19. It was about 3:30 in the morning, I guess, and it was winter time.
Kind of like about now.
Well, no, it's not cold up here yet.
No, I meant the time. It's a little before 4.
Mm-hmm. And I was asleep in bed, and I woke up, and I was sleeping on my left side, and all of a sudden I woke up, and I turned over to my right side, and I was facing the door of the bedroom, and being cold, I had the habit of throwing the covers over my head. Well, I did that this time, and all of a sudden, about maybe 2-3 minutes passed, and I started getting scared, very, very frightened. And I tried to come out from under the covers, and I couldn't pull them off. And I mean, I clawed at them and just pulled, and I couldn't.
Oh, I wouldn't like that.
And all of a sudden...
Covers are supposed to protect you.
Well, these didn't. Since then, I've never slept with the covers on my head ever since then. But all of a sudden, there was a scream in my ear, just a shrill scream, that my head just, you know how you feel when you've been screamed in your ear when you were small before, you know, kids.
Sure.
And my head just, it just vibrated the way that screamed. And I tried to call my father. And I'd open my mouth and nothing would come out. And I'd just be open and gasping and trying to call. And finally I managed to just say, Daddy. Just barely got it out.
Yes.
And when I said that, then the covers came off. I was still trying to take them off. And they came off all of a sudden. And, well, like I said, ever since then, I just do not sleep with the covers over my head, not a sheet.
My dear lady, I've heard a lot of I jumped onto the cover stories, but I have never heard I went under the covers and then tried to get out and the covers wouldn't come off. That's
they would not. I know, they just would not come off. And like I said, I still do not sleep with my head under the covers anymore.
I can't say I blame you, but it's like, gee, there's nowhere to hide.
Well, hide under the bed. There's no place. Get underneath the bed or someplace.
Well, look, I appreciate your story. It is unlike any I have ever heard, and I'm afraid it's going to have to be the topper for the for the day. I'm afraid.
Well, I'll be.
You know, the night just kind of flew by, as it were.
Well, I've been trying for quite a few years to get in. This is the first time I managed.
You've been trying for years?
Well, about 4 or 5 years.
I kind of wish you wouldn't say that. It discourages people.
Oh, it shouldn't because I finally got through.
Well, see, there you are. All right.
Goodbye.
All right. Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. There's a tradition here.
Oh.
With our last caller.
Oh.
You get to say, good night, America.
Oh, good. Good night, America.
Take care.